Welcome to the Kernel of Knowledge webinar series from the National Network of Libraries of Medicine, Greater Midwest Region. My name is Darlene Caskey, and I'm the NNLM All of Us Community Engagement Coordinator for the Greater Midwest Region, and your host and moderator for today's session. So if you're joining us for the very first time, you might be wondering who we are and what we do. The National Institutes of Health, or NIH, is the nation's leading medical research agency, consisting of 27 institutes and offices. For example, you might be familiar with the National Cancer Institute or the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is getting quite a bit of press these days. The National Library of Medicine, or NLM, also is an NIH initiative and institute, and it's the world's largest biomedical library. The library is located on the NIH campus in Bethesda, Maryland, and it maintains and makes available a vast print collection. And it also produces electronic information resources such as Medline Plus. The National Network of Libraries of Medicine, or NNLM, is an outreach program of the National Library of Medicine. The Greater Midwest Region, or GMR, is one of the 8 regional offices across the United States, and it's where I'm at, and we're located at the University of Iowa. Right now, I'm actually working from my home, but this is where we're based. I'm in Iowa. So the NNLM supports the National Library of Medicine's mission to advance the progress of medicine and improve the public's access to health information. We do this in 3 ways. We provide our members with training, such as this webinar, as well as opportunities to engage with community partners, using our resources to initiate programs, to increase capacity and raise awareness of quality health information. I can give you an example. In 2017, the National Library of Medicine received a grant from the NIH Precision Medicine Research Program called All of Us. And as a result of this partnership, the NNLM All of Us National Program was formed. So the NNLM All of Us program is a subset of our current network, and it's comprised of 2 national centers and 8 regional coordinators. The NNLM All of Us Community Engagement Network, for which I'm a part of, has 2 aims. One is to help the public libraries support the health information and digital literacy needs in their communities. And the second is to raise awareness of NIH, All of Us Research Program, and precision medicine. So you might be asking, what is precision medicine? It's an emerging approach to healthcare based on the individual. It takes into account personal lifestyle, environment, and biology. And All of Us is an NIH Precision Medicine Research Program. They're asking 1 million or more persons living in the United States to voluntarily participate. And why is this important? Because the more data we have from a variety of people, the faster we can accelerate research and medical breakthroughs. That enables individualized prevention, treatment, and care for everybody. And you can learn more by visiting their website and watching this video.
Precision medicine is getting the data to provide treatments to individuals as opposed to collections of people.
Whether it's a targeted therapy, whether it's medication, we have to base that off of all of those individuals that make up this country who are going to be receiving healthcare based on the results of the Precision Medicine Initiative.
Many people living with rare diseases don't know they have them yet. The benefits of the rare disease community being involved are phenomenal.
Not just to have those communities or disease groups represented, but also to gain new insights that you might not have been able to have 5, 10 years ago.
Now we can explore across diseases where we hadn't thought about them being connected before.
You think about paralysis, you think about someone can't walk, someone can't move their hands or their arms, but there are a host of secondary complications that come with that. Increased blood pressure, susceptibility to pressure wounds and pressure sores, autonomic dysreflexia, which can actually kill you. We don't focus enough on disability in our society, unfortunately.
Parkinson's patients and their families don't appreciate fully how much they are needed for research. The real holy grail is something that might stop or reverse progression and ultimately prevent anyone getting Parkinson's disease.
It's really important that people with autism be counted, that we look at their health needs just as we would look at my health needs your health needs.
There's enormous potential there for people living with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression. The diagnostics are not nearly as precise as they are for other disorders.
People are going to get to these diseases in different trajectories, and that's what we're going to learn now. Not just whether you have a disease and how do we tell, but how did you get there? Because I think that's really the hope of getting us out of these disorders.
Everyone is going to be a patient. Everyone. That's your reason to do it. And your kids are going to be patients, and your grandkids are going to be patients, and your wife's going to be a patient. So you have a real vested interest in supporting this initiative.
Diversity strengthens the science is very important to reach all types of participants for study to eradicate disease and illness.
Precision medicine will be a way to better treat each person as an individual and know that, one size doesn't fits all, and treatment A for this person might not work for the next person with the same exact disease.
It is abundant of knowledge, abundant of skills, and we all should be taking something away from this.
Nothing has been done like this in the past, looking holistically across healthcare. This is something that you can be part of, and I, for one, would be raising my hand to participate.
So today's educational program is brought to you with funding from the All of Us research program. The Round Lake Area Public Library, under the direction of Jim DiDonato, received an NNLM All of Us Award to retain Christine Damon from Lessons in Care L3C. Chris is a gerontologist and an adult educator who has consulted nationally with a variety of service industries and nonprofit organizations. Through her work, she has created and presented a series of dementia-related programs focusing on disease identification, as well as communication, function, and home modification support strategies. As the lead consultant for the Northeastern Illinois Area Agency on Aging's Dementia-Friendly Initiative, our NNLM All of Us Award provided Chris the opportunity to partner with 10 public libraries throughout the Northeast Illinois and Southwest Wisconsin regions to provide dementia-friendly training for staff. So thank you, Chris and Jim, for joining us today and sharing your expertise. And I'm going to turn the program over to you, Chris.
Okay, whoop. I should share my screen. That would be handy, right? Let's see here. Okay, so here we are. So thank you so much, Darlene. We appreciate your support financially and otherwise. I don't know if we could have, this was a real opportunity for us to get to these libraries and help spread the word about how libraries can help communities support their patrons, and that's people with dementia and their families and the community by being more dementia friendly. So we're going to start off, Jim and I today are going to start off with telling you a little bit about what it is that we're going to talk about, and then Jim's going to start to present about some of the resources that are useful, and then we will move from there. So without further ado, I am going to talk about the objectives of today's presentation. So the first thing, as I mentioned, Jim is going to introduce some of the dementia resources that are that come through the NNLM and can be really beneficial to you and to your patrons. We'll talk about dementia and identify some of the challenges, which I'm sure you've either experienced or heard much about, but we'll also talk about strengths, because those are something that often are kind of neglected, and they can be very useful when you're communicating with a person with dementia. We'll talk about the needs of people with dementia. People with dementia, especially in the early stages, can communicate, and we need to listen to what they have to say. We'll talk about some basic communication strategies that are really beneficial for people with dementia, and then we will also talk about some of the strategies communication strategies that can work well in a library setting. in addition to that, we're going to share some dementia-friendly practices for libraries. So best practices that have been put together by the Dementia-Friendly America by a librarian who's a friend of mine, Mary Beth Reidner, whose husband had dementia, and she's been doing a lot of work in the library arena and dementia-friendly libraries. And we'll also combine that then with some strategies for enhancing the physical environment of the library. Finally, we'll summarize the values of these dementia-friendly communities. We should do some wrap-up and have time for some Q&A. So before I turn this over to Jim right now, if you notice this library down here in the bottom right-hand corner, that's the Sandell Library in Great Britain. Great Britain has kind of been the leader in dementia awareness and dementia friendliness. They're trying to keep people as home and as independent and as engaged in living for as long as possible. So this library was part of that initiative. So I'm going to now turn things over to Jim, and Jim's going to talk about some of these websites, which you might find extremely beneficial for your information and also for your patrons. So Jim?
Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate you introducing me. Just to let everyone know, Chris Damon is becoming kind of a leading expert and well-known speaker in her own right. So I am very privileged to be working with Chris, and without Chris's work on this project, we would not have been able to do it. So thank you very much, Chris. And of course, thank you to the National Library of Medicine and Darlene for your assistance in allowing us to acquire some funding for this grant. Darlene has mentioned a number of the items that that I'm going to hit upon very quickly. So some of this will be a little bit repetitious, but also new for some of you who have not taken a look at some of the National Library of Medicine's resources. The first item that we'll talk about very quickly is Medline Plus. There's Medline Plus and there's PubMed. Medline Plus is a great interface for consumers to get consumer health-based information. You're going to find this in kind of a consumer-ready format. You'll find a variety of topics on anything from just generic health topics to drugs and supplements, to various medical conditions and things of that sort. All of the information accessible through Medline Plus is in English and Spanish. This is free of charge. Someone had asked us about this yesterday. All of the NLM resources are free. We do pay for this through federal taxes. And this information is provided in print and electronic form. For those of you that would like to send links to information to your patrons, this is a great opportunity because all you have to do is find some of the information you're looking for and send it directly to them either via chat or email service. And when we all open up after the COVID pandemic has passed, you can order any number of these materials from Medline in English or Spanish, in some cases a number of other languages. And these, from a public library point of view, these are phenomenal resources that patrons can refer back to, or they can share with their caregivers or other family members. So I highly recommend that you take a look at Medline Plus. Yes, Medline Plus, sorry, I'm switching into PubMed already. Does anybody have any questions real quickly on Medline Plus? Okay. Dropping down to the NIH, one of the institutes that Darlene had indicated earlier in her introduction was one of the institutes, the NIH, which provides consumer professional access to the National Institutes of Health. And you can see there's kind of a breakdown here into things that would be much more specific to those looking for questions on aging. One topic in particular, one of the institutes within NIH, they provide consumer and professional access to up-to-date age-related health information, such as the Understanding Alzheimer's Genes booklet. They've got a lot of other literature in there, so I highly recommend that you guys take a look at this. because again, this is going to be helpful not just to clinicians and scientists, but also to the average patron who walks in the door and is seeking information for themselves or loved ones. If you take a look at our next slide, Chris has a screenshot of the new and improved PubMed interface. So PubMed is a lot like Medline, except it expands on the number of citations. I think Medline has somewhere around 26 million, and I think PubMed bumps that up to about 30, 31 million-ish. And they include things beyond Medline, such as articles that may not have yet been approved for publication, or that may be coming out in some future journals. You're going to see that PubMed also has on the left-hand side various categories, or in library parlance, facets that you can use to narrow down a search. And then again, this is going to be something that's very helpful to you for when you're looking for information for your patrons. You can either give them a real quick intro on using this to search themselves, or you can pull up this information yourself and then send that directly to them. Moving on to another resource that the National Library of Medicine provides, and again, Darlene had touched on this momentarily in regards to genetics and all of us, and that is the Genetics Home Reference Resource. Genetics Home Reference Resource is for a lot of people like me, who we know that there's some component of genetics that obviously causes or leads to various conditions. And we don't have the scientific background to fully understand that. But the information that you're going to see on the Genetics Home Reference page is provided in a way that has the layperson's language so that they can understand it. But again, it's been pulled from National Library of Medicine so that you're going to have quality information. You're going to have something that's already been vetted. And it's going to be available to you and your patrons for free. One of the things, if we go to the next slide, in the Genetics Home Reference, you'll see there are a couple of booklets here. They've got some downloadable booklets that are, they're really designed to help users kind of collect and organize and understand their own genetic information, as well as for these users to understand the importance of genetics to their families and diseases that also may run in families. So again, it kind of circles back around to what some of the All of Us funding is all about. Okay, does anybody have any questions for me on some of these NLM resources? And I think, Darlene, you may have to let us know, because I don't think I have a chat window on my screen.
Yeah, I'm looking at chat right now. No questions. Anybody have any questions about the resources from the National Library of Medicine? Okay, continue on, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. If I could just add to what Jim said, is that the lot of the resources, I'm usually on the National Institute of Aging website. A lot of those resources can be ordered at no cost. Sometimes you can get multiple copies, like up to 100 copies of brochures. Sometimes some of the pamphlets are 25 copies. Some things can be ordered singularly. They can be downloaded. They can be printed. So there are a lot of different ways that people can access those materials. And it's also very nice that they're in English and Spanish. So I order those materials and use them a lot when I do library programs. And so if you're doing health literacy in any way and you're looking for some really good materials, that's a great resource. I also want to point out that you're going to receive an outline and a list of resources that were used to create this presentation. The vast majority of those resources came from PubMed. So just to show you how easy that is to access and how user-friendly that can be and how useful. And so if you're running like crazy right now, again, you will receive that outline, and there's also some other resources that should be coming that could be really helpful. So we're going to move from where to find information about dementia to just what is dementia. And dementia, one thing to think about is it's an umbrella. A lot of times we hear the term dementia and Alzheimer's used interchangeably. Alzheimer's is actually a type of dementia. So we're going to define dementia and then talk about different types of dementia. But we're going to start with this concept of umbrella. And I want you to think about if somebody has a stomach ache, if you have a stomach ache, you know you have that symptom that your stomach hurts, but you don't know what's causing it. Was it something you ate? Is there a flu bug going around? Do you have celiac disease? Do you have an appendicitis? Do you have stomach cancer? And the list can go on beyond that. So you see that a stomach ache is a symptom of something, just like dementia has symptoms that there's something going on that's affecting a person's brain. And the person's brain was functioning normally prior to this, but then we start to see things that are happening more and more, which causes to be concerned that there's something that's not right. So we've got a group of symptoms that basically affect 4 different functions that people have. So the first one is memory, and you usually see short-term memory affected. And if you want to imagine how that feels, think about those times that you can't remember something. You know, and if there's anybody who's never forgotten anything, if you will let Darlene know that in the chat, that would be great. Because I haven't met anybody yet and we want to meet that first person. So short-term memory is a symptom. A second symptom is things like people have problems with problem solving, with their thinking skills, with their judgment. And again, this is something that happens to everybody. You know, people marry the wrong person, they take the wrong job, they went to the wrong college. We do a lot of things that are not making the best, that don't display the best decisions. So again, how do you feel when that happens? A third symptom of dementia is issues with language. So it could be anything from, oh, what's that thing called, you know, or what's her name again, to just blurting out things in public that, you know, really that is not something that's appropriate in a public setting. So if you have never done any of those things, please put that in the chat so Darlene can record that. And the fourth thing we often see with dementia is a change in behavior. So for example, a friend of mine has a son with a dementia that we're going to talk about. He's in his 40s. He'll come out of the bathroom and it doesn't make any difference who's in the house. He'll come out stark naked like a little kid because he has no sense of what appropriate behavior is for someone his age. So if you've never done anything that you later realized was, oh my goodness, that shouldn't happen, again, please let us know. So by now you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, what does this dementia look at? I've got all these symptoms. Well, here's the difference. A person with dementia this is happening to them all the time. Not only do they notice, and sometimes they'll say they don't, other people are noticing. And it's becoming so prevalent that they can't do their jobs if they're young enough to still be working. They might not be able to, if they're retired, living at home, they can't do what they need to do independently. It can affect their driving, it can affect their cooking, it can affect their money management, it can affect a lot of things. And it's something that is not just a passing thing like they had a bad night's sleep. It's a day-to-day ability to function that is affected by dementia. So I hope that makes it a little more clear what dementia is. And do we have any questions right now, Darlene?
No, not seeing anything. Anybody have
No?
any so far?
Okay, so anytime you have questions, I'm happy to answer questions during the presentation because that's the best time to be asking them. Because if you have a question, probably somebody else does too. So please feel free to put questions in the chat if you have those. So that's what dementia is. Dementia affects people who are in the library setting in a number of different ways. And this comes from the Dementia Friendly America in their library specific information, and should be receiving a copy of that too. So people with dementia, what can happen in a library is they have a hard time finding their way around and they can get a little lost sometimes. This is complicated by the fact that we have now moved from, the way libraries used to be organized in more closed stacks and everybody knew where everything was, to now we've got a lot of electronics. People are looking for a book, and back in the days you looked for a card catalog. Now you go to a computer. People don't know how to use the computer sometimes. People have a hard time finding things. So this can happen to all of us, but if somebody has dementia, you might see this on a more regular basis. Something else you might see is people have trouble forgetting or trouble completing familiar tasks. So a couple of those tasks are checking out books, which people sometimes forget nowadays. Another task is that sometimes people forget to bring books back. So an interesting story that I got from one of the libraries in Wisconsin when we were doing the on-site training is they have trouble with books not being checked out. But there was a woman who had a lot of books at home, and she remembered that books belonged to the library. So she was bringing her books to the library to make sure that the library had books. So familiar tasks, but kind of had a reverse order on that one. The third thing you might find is you might see more misplaced items and more of an ability, again, this has to do with getting lost, an inability to retrace steps. So you might find more in terms of keys or cell phones, or somebody has a book and they can't remember where they put it and you hope they didn't reshelve it. So that can be an issue. But just things that people just have a harder time navigating in libraries. And actually the biggest feedback I've gotten from libraries is more signs, and we'll talk about signage, but libraries need more signs to help people navigate and find their way around. Does anybody have any feedback or comments or other things that they've noticed with some of their patrons that maybe appear to be challenges in the library?
I'm looking at the chat box. Anybody have any questions so far or want to share a comment? No?
No? Okay. All right. So moving along, we'll give you a little bit about, let's tell you just a little bit about this, how many people are affected by dementia. So Alzheimer's disease is the most prevalent dementia, about 60 to 80% of all cases. And it affects about 10% of people 65 and older. So actually, dementia would affect more than 10% of the population, but maybe it's somewhere between 10 and 15%. Vast majority of people 65 and older are not affected, but there's still a significant number of people who have Alzheimer's or another dementia. A lot of people don't realize that the vast majority of people with dementia live in the community. So they're not in memory care, they're not in assisted living, they're not in a nursing home, they're living at home with their families or maybe with a friend, or they are living by themselves. And the significant portion of the people who live by themselves, over 25% of the people who live in the community, if somebody comes to the library and they have dementia, and they live alone, you could be the highlight of their day. You might be the only person that they encounter all day long. So you have a real opportunity to brighten their day, to help them out, to help them be more independent and engaged. I also want to talk about the 3 general stages of dementia, because a lot of people kind of envision that if somebody has dementia, then, you know, they're fine one day and all of a sudden they're not. Well, it progresses. So generally there are 3 stages. So the first stage is mild, and people in the mild stages of dementia, you just often, people once in a while will think there's something off, but basically people are able to function independently. Some people might still work. Some people might be driving, cooking, caregiving, doing all kinds of things. So they may have challenges. They may forget things a little bit more. They may make a few more mistakes, but they are generally able to do what they need to do. In a moderate stage, people begin to be more challenged with daily tasks. So what you might see in the library is you might notice somebody's forgetting more to bring books back, being a little more confused. You might notice that a man who shaves, that the shaving is not quite as well done as it used to be. Maybe one side of the face it has been shaved more closely than the other. You might see the buttons that are a little lopsided on a shirt. You might notice that a woman's makeup or hair, though she's trying to do it every day, is still not quite the same as it used to be. But people are really, really trying to keep their routines, try to do what they've always done as an adult, try to be independent, but more people will start to notice that people can't quite handle the challenges of maintaining independence. And then there's this called the severe stage, and this is when someone needs full-time assistance. So it would be rare that you see someone in the library in the severe stage of dementia. These are people that lots of times they have trouble. They can't walk by themselves. They might have trouble sitting up in the chair. They need help with eating, with changing their clothes. So the chances of you seeing them in the library are quite slim. You're going to see people in mild to moderate stages. So does anybody have any questions here about any of the statistics or the stages of dementia or comments?
Had a couple of comments come in from the earlier things you've said. People gave examples of people they've encountered in their libraries. One person said they forget how to come in and out, even though they're regular patrons. They forget where the entrance is, the exit. One person says there's a patron that comes in repeatedly asking for help about how to cut and paste a document, and she'll help that person, and minutes later they've asked her for the same help again. Then we did have a question.
Okay.
They'd like to hear of any successful stories about using memory cafes within libraries, because I guess this person hasn't had that many participants.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to talk about memory cafes in a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
And we had one more question that just came in. What else causes dementia? That was one of the questions.
What causes dementia? Well, there's so many different dementias. There's about 100 different disorders, and dementia can be caused by a number of something goes awry with proteins in the brain. Sometimes it's brain damage. Sometimes it's blood doesn't get to the brain. There are a number of things that cause dementia. So I can't possibly talk to them all. There is in the outline that people will receive, there's a book from the National Institute of Health. It's called The Dementias, Hope Through Research. And that is it's a really good basic guideline, 30-some pages of what could cause dementias and some of the basic dementias. So dementia is much more complicated than this presentation will demonstrate. But going to some of the resources that Jim talked about, and this booklet, I just find actually even before we had the grant, I was on the National Library of Medicine resources a lot, and they can be extremely helpful. There'll also be in the outline Jim's contact information of mine, and anybody can feel free to contact me for guidance on where to find more information if they need it. Okay. All right, we're going to move on right here and talk about the dementias. So as I mentioned, there's more than 100 conditions that can cause dementia. We're going to talk about the top 4. So I already mentioned Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease mainly affects people 65 and older. It's sometimes genetic, but sometimes people have the Alzheimer's gene. It doesn't mean that they will get Alzheimer's. It means that they might have a tendency in that direction. Alzheimer's disease generally affects memory. Starts off with short-term memory. People forget where they put their keys. People forget birthdays. People forget doctor's appointments. But generally, it's all by itself. It's a very slow progression. So Alzheimer's disease can go on for 20 years before someone can eventually pass away from Alzheimer's disease. The second disease we'll talk about, and generally has been accepted to be the second highest reason that people have dementia, is because of vascular dementia. So vascular dementia has to do with our vascular system, and basically it's an issue of insufficient blood flow to the brain. So it could be, you might recognize the most frequent related incident is a stroke or a mini stroke. And what happens is vascular dementia is more known to affect thinking and judgment. And instead of this slow slope, what happens is that people will have some kind of incident, stroke, mini stroke, some other kind of function that impedes brain, blood flow to the brain, and there'll be a drop in their cognitive ability. And then they're on medication, they get therapy, things kind of flatten out, and then there's another incident. And that just keeps going. So it's stepwise, but it's always stepping down. It's never really stepping up, is how vascular dementia generally works. And this is all really general. The third most prevalent dementia, and Lewy body people would say, oh no, Lewy body actually occurs a lot more than is recognized. But Lewy body dementia is a very variable dementia, and it's more like the path is more like a roller coaster. So people sometimes have days where they are just as white as rain, as they say, and you wouldn't have any idea that there's anything wrong, and you might see them a couple days later and they're confused and they can't remember. Robin Williams, the comedian, was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, and the story is that he committed suicide because of that. So it can be really hard on the person with dementia. It can be hard on the person who's the caregiver. Often people with Lewy body dementia are kind of awake at night, sleep during the day. They might have hallucinations. Fortunately, those hallucinations, if they're not affected also by some kind of medication, but generally the hallucinations of small children, or small children, of course, are small animals or children. But this is one thing that the medication needs to be correct, because if people get the wrong medication, it can make their situation much worse. And then the fourth dementia I'm going to talk about, the other three are generally 60, 65 and older, and people that are affected. Frontotemporal dementia tends to affect a younger population, often the age of 40 to 60. So when people are in their prime earning years, in their prime child raising years, and so it can be really, really difficult on the family because the person can't work anymore. There's a book, Learning to Speak Alzheimer's, and the woman who writes the book, she was changing her children's diapers and her child's diapers and her husband's diaper pretty much at the same time. So that can give you an idea of how devastating that could be. Frontotemporal dementia is dementia that starts off with behavior. So as I mentioned, this friend of mine whose son will sometimes come out of the bathroom naked and not realize there's anything wrong. Or you might see a policeman that starts stealing stuff, totally out of character. So it affects behavior, it affects language, so people lose their language skills, and then it'll also affect memory. That also has a slope, a downward slope. There's also a mixed dementia, so it's not bad enough that people have one dementia, they can have more than one. And actually research now is saying, some of it is saying that most people have multiple dementias. Once the brain starts to be affected, it's affected in more than one way. Finally, or not finally, but you also want to know that some dementia symptoms are reversible. So of the top 5 reasons that people have symptoms of dementia, 2 of them are something that occur quite often. One of them is medications. Especially older adults, medications aren't tried out or tested on older adults, generally speaking. A mixture medicine is not, tested for people. And it's just, so a lot of times changing medications can make a difference. Pulling a medication away or changing a medication can make a big difference. There's something called the beers list, and that's like, bottle of beer. Beers list has a number of medications that, they recommend older adults not be taking without being extremely cautious. Something else that can be reversible is alcoholism, though probably not to the same degree of success as medications. There's sleep apnea, there's celiac disease, there is just plain old lack of sleep can make a difference, especially as we age. So there are a number of things that can be reversible, so it's always really important to find out, seek medical professional advice from a family doctor and then from a neurologist that specializes in dementia if there are any reason at all to suspect that something is going on with your brain or someone else's. And then finally, these dementias differ from delirium. Delirium is kind of, somebody asked me yesterday if it's, how do you tell it from Lewy body dementia, but delirium is a sudden onset of confusion, anxiety that often comes, for older adults, often could come with an infection. It could be caused by medication. So if you notice that a patron is normally seems, even if they have dementia, they all of a sudden are not themselves that day. Their situation seems much, much worse. They could be really sick, or they could have some kind of medication overdose. So you might want to have discuss having a policy at the library about what do you do if you notice that a patron is really, really having a super challenging day and is totally out of character for who they are. And if we have time, we can talk a little more about that later. So I've thrown a whole lot at you. Darlene, do we have any questions or comments?
A couple more comments came in just a little earlier. Another example of somebody who, a woman who would come in and the books were all marked up with black marks and lipstick, and she'd been a regular patron for a long time, and then these books started coming in damaged. They called her out on it. She didn't know what they were talking about. She did pay for a couple of books, and then she gave up her library card altogether. Another person responded perhaps to that comment and said that people who are highly intelligent will often, when they start recognizing they may have some dementia, they try very, very hard to hide it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, because what happens is we take away people's independence. I'm sorry, you're going to the home. That's kind of the way it works. And people don't want to give up their independence. So yes, people will try to hide it. Absolutely. Any other comments or questions?
Nope, not right now.
Okay, so we're going to move on after I give you this dire description of what happens. let's talk about some of the strengths that people have with dementia. One of them is their long-term memories tend to be good. There's a theory that says first in, last out. So those things that we learn early in life, we hang on to. You'll note on the screen, it says that those memories may be comforting or frightening. So for instance, if we talk about a veteran who, maybe was on a ship during World War II, and where I live, there are a lot of veterans. And I see a veteran with a naval cap and has the name of his ship. I have a pretty good idea that he or she is proud of their service, and I can say thank you for your service, and they will light up and they will be very happy to talk to you about their experience. At the same time, you might encounter somebody else who had PTSD when they were in the service, and their experience was negative, but they have dementia on top of it. And I'm told by people at the VA that they are often will have a very negative reaction to anybody bringing up their time in service. So knowing a little bit about the person or being aware of what they wear, kind of what they're reading, not being snoopy, but just being aware of things can really make a difference. And so you can use what you know to comfort, or you don't want to frighten people because that's just going to create a mess for everybody. People with long-term memory or people with dementia often have very good procedural memories. Remember first in, last out. So especially if they've been coming to the library for a long time, they will remember so many of the procedures about what you do at the library. Again, we've kind of thrown them a monkey wrench by coming up with digital catalogs and digital checkouts. So that just could give you a heads up if people are kind of not doing what you expect. That's because we've kind of changed the game in the middle. Another strength of people with dementia is their senses become more heightened. So a lot of times people with dementia can't process language very well. Sometimes they also have hearing issues. And if you can't hear it, you can't remember it. So they use whatever sensory skills they have to interpret. And a lot of that depends on light, sound, and then our body language, our facial expressions, and our tone of voice. So you just kind of want to be more aware of the message, the whole body message that you're sending to somebody. Not only people with dementia, but everybody. I think a lot of times we don't think about that, but people with dementia are going to be more aware of that because they don't have the ability to process the language quite often. On the other hand, they are also going to use nonverbal communication skills to send you a message. Or if they send you a message and verbally, it might be short, like no. And so you want to take them at their word when they say no. They might forget about saying no, and you could come back 5 minutes later and deal with the situation, but just a heads up. Frowning faces, crossed arms, all those negative sorts of messages that you don't want to send. If you're getting it from them, take it as a message because that's their communication skill. And then finally, people with dementia can read. So there was a woman that I met from Sunrise, their national office, and place that she was working, she heard a woman in the dementia unit who was reading and reading and reading, and she out loud, and she thought, oh, can I turn this into something? So she found another woman who was blind on another floor and said, would you like somebody to read to you? And the woman said yes. So she matched up the woman who had dementia, who loved to read, with the woman who was blind, and actually that turned into a Bible study group. And ultimately, they had to have somebody else take over the group because it became so large. But that's just one example of people like to read. Readers like to be readers. And some of it is sometimes just the sound of the word. is just really soothing and comforting to people. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. And we'll talk some more about some resources that can help people who like to read. Any questions, comments?
No, nothing at this time.
No? Okay. So they talked to people in Great Britain who had dementia and said, well, what do you want? So they came up with basically three things. One is they want to be safe and to be able to find their way around. So I've heard so much about signs in libraries. And you think about it, if you're in the library and how do you feel if you can't find your way out? So there's a sign, not being able to find their way around, or find the bathroom, or to find the right bathroom, or if it's a caregiver there with a loved one, and what do? You have to help somebody in the bathroom. So being safe and being able to find your way around, signage is just huge. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. People who are coming to the library with dementia are coming to the library because they know the library and they want to come there because they know you and they believe you know them. So it's not just, in addition to the library, it's banks and shops and cafes and all these other familiar places that people have gone to. They like their routines and they want to keep coming back as long as they can, because all these places, including the library, you make them feel good. And third thing is they want to keep their social connections. Too often people with dementia, they feel bad. They've been diagnosed with dementia. They feel bad about forgetting, and so they just want to stay home. And all the research says that the more people stay home and isolate themselves, the more that diminishes their brain's ability to function. So we want to encourage people to be out there talk to them, having them talk to us. Sometimes it makes a difference if what they say is true, and sometimes it doesn't. And we just keep the conversation going because that just is really beneficial to them. And it's also good for their families. If you've ever taken care of somebody with dementia, or somebody who has, what a hard job that is. And so the more we can support the patrons with dementia and their families, the better it is for the whole community. So we're going to kind of switch a little bit, and we're talking about how to help people and how to talk to them. And so talk some about communication. So the big thing is building trust and rapport with your patrons. As librarians, you do that already in so many cases. But if you think about things that you meet somebody new, meet somebody you haven't seen in a while, you meet somebody that needs a little bit seems a little bit anxious, you think of some of the things that you do to make people feel more comfortable. So if you could take a couple seconds and maybe put in a chat box some things that maybe you do that help people feel more comfortable.
So what do you do in your library to welcome people? Okay, smile, call them by name, make the eye contact. Be patient, even though it's hard sometimes. You greet them.
Yeah. So all those good things, all those things you do for, anybody else, the same things work for people with dementia. And once they feel they can trust you, then you're going to be much more able to, if you need to help somebody or correct them or something, much more able to accomplish what you need to do. So yeah, all great responses. So I also want to point out that librarians, to me, are just kind of a natural when it comes to communicating with people with dementia. I used to train for Follett Software and their school library software. And so I was libraries all over the country. And I got to tell you, everywhere I went, librarians were just so nice. I loved that job. But a lot of that, or some of it, has to do with the nature of librarians. Some of it has to do with, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the ALA-RUSA guidelines, which are the Reference and User Services Association library guidelines, which I'm going to run through real quick. But when you see these, you go, oh yeah, that's what we do. So just to refresh your memory or to throw those out there if you're not familiar. First thing is guidelines say that you want to be approachable. So this is what I was just hearing, and is how to build trust and rapport. That's a lot of what you're doing. That smile makes a huge difference. Display interest in what people are looking for, what they're doing, or you'll even see, later you're going to see a video about other ways to display interest in your patrons. A third point is listening, inquiring about what they need and then listening to what it is that they tell you to help them find what it is they're searching for. And then doing the searching and then following up. Did you find what you need? Oh, you know what? I ran across this book. And I thought maybe you'd like this too because it ties in. So again, this seems just a natural behavior in terms of librarians. So just want to keep those things in mind. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're just trying to build on skill set that so many of you already have. So does anybody have any feedback, comments here?
No, nothing at the present time.
Okay. So just to give you some specifics, and I'm finding that a lot of people like these, some specifics in terms of some communication strategies. These are from the University of Queensland in Australia. Dementia Friendly started Great Britain, went to Australia, and so the university put together a series of videos for assisted living, memory care facilities about communicating with people with dementia. We kind of borrowed their idea and created a couple of videos. Jim's staff created videos that you're going to see in a couple minutes about how to communicate, interact in positive ways with people at the library. So we'll go through these strategies a little bit we've talked about, and then we're going to watch the videos, and then you can see if you can pick up on the things that make communications go well. So the first thing is that M in message is to maximize attention. And if you think about trying to communicate with a loved one, with with a friend, with somebody that you need to get your message across, you really, if you have their full attention, it's going to make it much easier to communicate. So keep that in mind with people with dementia. Sometimes we need to kind of move them out of to a quiet space to have a conversation because there's too much going on around that is a distraction, but keeping their attention, maximizing it is really important. The E in message is to watch your expression and body language, and we already talked about this, how important, how much that can influence the person with dementia. That first S is for simple, keep it simple. People with dementia, if you suspect it all, you're not going to diagnose. I don't diagnose. If you suspect at all that a person's having a hard time following what you're saying, you want to back off, make it more simple, just make it easier to understand. Give them the easiest, shortest response to their questions as possible while answering the question. That second S is support their conversation. So supporting the conversation. So you nod your head, you say, okay, maybe you ask a question. Can you tell me more about that? So just like we do with everybody else, supporting the conversation. That A, and this is a different one that you might think about, is to assist with visual aids. It's a great conversation starter that you'll notice that somebody is wearing, like I talked about the veteran with the cap on. You might notice a woman who's got a dress that has flowers on it, and oh, well, do you like flowers? So Just something that you notice about the person that you feel free, you use your judgment about something to comment on, because people with dementia are really into concrete sorts of things. And they tend to stick with what they like. So if they're displaying something about themselves, it's probably something that they like. G is for get their message, just like we talked about before. Somebody says no, they mean no. If they're frowning, something's not quite right. So you want to make sure that don't be pushing the button, because if that happens, you could create a bigger problem for yourself than you want to. And this last E, we've also talked about, is to encourage and engage in conversation. You support it. If you don't think what they're saying is true and it doesn't make any difference, you just let them say it. You could ask questions, but sometimes people with dementia will want to talk on and on. A lot of people, 2-3 minutes can make a world of difference in their day, and it takes so much energy for them that they're really satisfied with that, and that can really help them out. So what we're going to do here is Darlene is going to show one video, and then we'll give a little bit of discussion and then a second one. The first video is called The Good Librarian. So the staff at Round Lake named these. So look for the things that this librarian is doing that creates a positive communication situation, and then please communicate in the chat box what you see. Okay, Darlene.
We good? Can we see the video?
I can.
Great.
You're really interested in baseball, aren't you?
Yeah.
The Cubs?
Yeah. I used to play for the Cubs. Cubby Blue.
Oh wow, really? You played for the Cubs?
Yeah. I hurt my leg.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Are you still a fan?
Me gustan los Cacheros y los Bravos.
Oh, I'm sorry. No entiendo.
The Cubs and the Braves, they're rivals.
Oh, that's still true. Also, I see that you have some books you checked out about baseball last month. Did you want to renew those?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so those are renewed, and here are these.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go Cubs!
Okay, thanks, Darlene. So if you take a minute or two and jot down some positive communication strategies that you noticed during that, and then Darlene's going to share those with us.
Okay. So I said they noticed that he enjoys baseball, and she tries to engage with him on that subject. And also she did a friendly reminder that he had other books and she would offer to help him out. Let's see, what else did they say? She kept it very simple, and she asked how he was doing. Any other comments about how she engaged? Good eye contact.
Yep. We've had people comment that she didn't answer the phone.
Yes.
That was something that, so she kept his attention. She didn't kind of wander off. And then there's also, if you notice, he spoke in Spanish. And actually Round Lake has a large Latino population, so this quite possible this could happen. People with dementia, often if they learn a second language with the dementia, sometimes will lapse back into their first language. She waited for him and gave him some space, and he was able to come back in English. There's no guarantee that that will happen, but she gave him the space to do that. So that was something else to take into consideration.
Great. They also pointed out that she asked very simple questions, yes or no, but she engaged in conversation by being cheerful. Now, at one library, they said we're not allowed to point out what they're checking out, so I would have to rely on his Cubs hat. I liked that she was friendly and asked him about his books and other things he had checked out.
Yeah, and that's a question I've had at other libraries. And because, if somebody's checking out books on anxiety, do you want to comment about it? So yeah, everything is a policy, it's something just to think about the library and what is your policy. And I wouldn't argue with the policy about not talking about books, but some places that's okay, that people are using their judgment. So commenting about the hat is a great thing. Okay, can we go to that second video? The second video is actually called The Mean Librarian. So while you're watching this one, you want to think about some pointers that maybe think about you're coaching this librarian, but you don't need to be real gentle with her. What could she improve upon?
Where's Mavis?
There's no one here by that name.
Where's Mavis?
Can I help you with something else? Can I help you find someone else?
I don't know.
Are you looking for a book to read? Are you looking for music? Maybe you'd like a video?
Mavis. I like to read.
Okay, so what can I help you find?
I like to read. Me interesan los pájaros.
Oh, no, I don't speak Spanish. I need to call somebody to help you out.
Mavis.
Oh, no. You need to check those out.
Oh, no.
They need to be.
No. Eso no hay. No. Bueno. No. Mavis.
Okay.
Okay, so what do you think?
She was stern and not patient, not engaged, distracted. She kept working on other tasks and did not look at him. She ignored him. Kept asking him more questions instead of keeping it simple, made him more confused. And didn't address the thing he wanted, who was Mavis, and mean. So I guess that's why the video is called Mean Librarian. Not a friendly voice.
Yeah, all the way around. So this is not her for real, this is her acting. So yeah, and actually I saw a comment pop up that she made somebody grit their teeth. So yeah. So just the two things that you can keep in mind with all of this is keep it simple, but we've never talked about, but just like dementia, interaction, care, everything else, just kind of slows things down a little bit. So, that focus on patients, just kind of slowing things down can make a world of difference. So we hope that these two videos and the message strategies help you kind of better understand kinds of things that work with people with dementia and don't work because you've seen them in action. So we're going to go from here, from communication to some best practices at libraries. Again, these are found on the Dementia Friendly America website, and there are a lot more practices. None of these are carved in stone. They're ideas that libraries have been using and might or might not work for you. I want to start off with one that's wear name tags. Now, I've been to libraries and people have name tags on. One of the problems is one librarian told me the font's too small, so that people are getting too close to the librarian to see what his or her name is. You have to remember a lot of people with dementia are also older. So the recommendation is first name only, but nice big letters. Probably black on white is the easiest for people to see. So again, suggestions. Second thing is to train on dementia and communications, which we're doing today. A third thing is that providing materials for caregivers and people with dementia. There is a group of materials that's going to come out is a brochure from Mary Beth Reidner that she compiled a few years ago that has a lot of materials for people that people with dementia would really appreciate. A lot of it has large font, a lot of it think about things that people in a certain age group are interested in. I actually had a woman who told me that she found an old camera catalog for her ex-husband who was interested in cameras, and he would spend hours going over that catalog. So it doesn't mean you have to go out and spend a lot of money, and sometimes people donate things, but there are quite often things that people would appeal to people, and that brochure from Mary Beth should help with that. Another idea to keep in mind, depending on where you are cultural and ethnic interests. So Round Lake, as I mentioned, large Latino population. I live in Waukegan, large African-American, Polish population. I've been to libraries in Wisconsin where there's a large farm population, large hunting population. So think about both genders, think about everybody. What do people in this age group, and generally it's going to be 65 and up, what are they interested in, and what materials can we provide for them that are, easy to handle, easy to read, maybe easy to listen to also. And then, and a lot of people, we did this webinar yesterday in Illinois, and a lot of people like the idea of individual appointments for people. This can help the person with dementia. The man who was looking for Mavis, Mavis sat down with him, and maybe that's Mavis's habit, and find out what he's interested in and helping him find materials. They may be in the adult section, they may be in the children's section. That's like his prerogative, what he would like. It also could be very helpful to a caregiver who's trying to find materials for a loved one. They're often very strapped for time, and so if they could talk to you for a few minutes about what they need, and you might be able to put together some resources for them, that could be really helpful. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments here about these best practices?
I appreciate how you're mentioning the cultural differences and how to play to those strengths and be aware and have humility. Noticing that's really good.
Okay.
I love the idea about appointments, making appointments with them.
Yep, that can help in a lot of cases. A lot of this, until we get back to normal, it's going to be hard. But this thing, just keep things to keep in mind. And like I said, this is kind of to me where librarians generally are. Some other ideas is to display dementia-related books, DVDs, etc., especially during Alzheimer's Awareness Month, during other, if there's heart disease issues or stroke issues that have to do with vascular dementia. So just other things to keep in mind. And if those things are all in one spot, books, DVDs, other things that have a some kind of health focus that makes it really easy for both the person who's concerned about an issue and also with a caregiver to find those resources. Some ideas that we've picked up along the way is theme materials, reminiscence kits. This over here on the left with the hat and then the Oscar and Dorothy's red shoes. This comes from a library I was at, one of the Northern Illinois library system meetings over on the Fox River, and one of the libraries had put together this kit with some videos, some books, some props, to just kind of bring out for somebody who loved old movies. This could be a very entertaining sort of kit that a person could take home pre and post COVID-19. Over here on the right, this is a kit that is from Great Britain, and it has all kinds of World War II memorabilia. Hopefully there's a lot of positive things in there, but they've been having a lot of good success with it in Great Britain. And I mentioned Tales and Travel here. I also want to show you the example of a Tales and Travel kit. We've been handing these out thanks to the grant. We were able to provide kits to 12 different libraries. And so what they do is their combination, there's a multitude of materials in there that work for memory cafes or other places, you know, it could be one-on-one or it could be a group of people. But basically we created these kits, we put them in a suitcase. Here's part of the kit for the Middle East. So we put together with a book with a folk tale and some facts about the Mideast. Those two handouts are in large font, and then everybody could read those because the font's large. We've got music. We have a globe to show people where they are. We have tambourines, so those can be passed around and people can, when they're listening to the music, participate in the music. And then we have a collection of books about the Middle East. And so these books were selected based on pictures, font size, variety of reading levels. So some of these were from the children's books. So 3 of them were children's books. Other books were adult books. So just a variety of things that you might already have on your shelf. So the Tales and Travel Memories website, and that's listed in the handout, has a lot of ideas for putting together kits, a lot of downloadable materials. And then I have used these at memory cafes where we've had like about 10 people, and I've had everybody read, everybody with dementia or didn't have dementia. So caregivers come to memory cafes, they bring their loved ones, people attend by themselves who might have some memory issues. So that's one way that we could support people with dementia. In the Bridges library system in Wisconsin, their system alternates, so they do memory cafes at different sites every couple months. They vary. Ella Township Library in Lake County, Illinois, is been doing a lot of memory cafes, and now they're taking them online since the COVID-19. So people are doing them that way, and there's been a lot of participation. It ends up being respite for a caregiver because it's a break because their loved one is interested in what's going on. So yeah, those have been really successful. I can maybe answer questions or talk to you more about that after, or you can feel free to contact me. Some libraries are doing support groups, some do book clubs, some do discussions, but just a variety of things depending on kind of like let your patrons drive what they want. Or you can try some things out. My secret to memory cafes is I used to call everybody and remind them every month. So maybe you got to volunteer to do that. But it has to be things that people can do, and they can laugh, they can participate. So like I said, we could talk more about that. And you can also take materials to the community. So the Tales and Travel started at the Gail Borden Library in Elgin. They take them there to senior living communities. They do the same thing in Ella Township. Sometimes they use these in read aloud programs, homebound patrons, sometimes caregivers check them out. So and like I said, this is a selection of ideas that are possible for the, best practices. So I am noticing that we're getting short on time here, so I'm going to just keep moving right now. I want to show you that here's some examples of signs. We've been talking about that. So you notice that these signs are, and these are downloaded from Google, but they're black on yellow. So black on yellow, black on white is very good because for all of us, as we age, our eyes need more contrast. You notice the pictures. So that's also another marker for people so they don't have to just read the word. And then signs for people with dementia need to be at eye level. So I know ADA says put the braille at the side. Well, dementia, you need a sign on a door or next to the door. So it's a little bit different situation. Other things to think about are lighting. You don't want shadowy, dark areas in the library because people with dementia, sometimes they see things there that aren't there. So you want nice, even lighting, and you want to avoid glare because glare hurts eyes. As we get older, glare is not good for anybody's eyes. Usually libraries don't have issues with flooring, seating, sound is, now they're a little noisier than usual, than they used to be, but there's usually a place where somebody can go and have some quiet. And then one thing I want to point out is family restrooms. You often find family restrooms in the children's part of the library, but not in the other part of the library. Well, as we have an older population and caregivers not only are taking care of people with dementia, but maybe other issues, a way for people to access family restrooms is becoming more important. So I know nobody has a whole pot of money to be adding on family restrooms at their library, but just something you want to keep in mind, or if you're have the funds to build a new library or whatever, that's something that could be useful. And just to point out, this library at the bottom here is the interior of the Sandell Library. The seating clusters, and then nice large signs on top of the stacks indicating what kind of books are there. Some pictures would make it even better. So I want to give Jim about 5 minutes here to talk about what's going on at Round Lake Library, some things that they're doing. We've built in case we had a whole lot of time, to a couple of situations, but we're going to leave those for your library. You take back to your library, maybe discuss these about what you do if people don't check out books, or if people don't bring books back, what are your policies? And I don't know if this presentation would change your policies or, reinforce them or whatever, but just want to make sure that everybody thinks about what to do to create a win-win situation. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jim. So Jim, can you take about 5 minutes or so and talk about what's going on around Lake?
Yeah, thank you very much. We had been exploring creating some kits, themed kits for autism, actually. And about that time, we also were working with Chris on this grant. So the memory kits, we said, hey, this is kind of a similar in process for how we're putting these kits together. And some of our staff had used many years ago some of the old bifocal kits. So we had some familiarity with that kind of thing. And as we were talking about doing this, of course, this is, right before coronavirus really starts to break out quite a bit. So we're thinking if we offer a curbside service, that the to-go kits, the pre-made theme kit, which is very common in youth services departments, we will extend that out and look at producing some of those or compiling a set of kits like that just for the general public. And this could include anything on such topics as for like kids and parents, maybe like toilet training or how to help your child kind of get into a restful mood so that they can go to bed at night. But of course, anything relating to dementia as well. Our Books on Wheels program, we got some new people in, and that was great when we made a couple of staffing changes at the library. The downside is they were so good that they've tripled our Books on Wheels and homebound delivery patrons, the number of people that are using that service. So now we're looking at how to adjust that, and we've thought about kind of taking the show on the road sort of a thing and bringing some of the memory kits with us to some of these local organizations so that their clients can then kind of participate in like a senior story hour or senior memory hour sort of a thing, kind of like a memory cafe kind of a thing, but in an assisted living facility. Next door to us is the Park District, the Round Lake Area Park District, and they used to have a phenomenal senior center, but they've gone through some staffing changes and budgeting changes too, and we're not sure where that's at. So we're looking at a way to reach that group. I know there's still sort of people that go to that, but that's another target area that I'm hoping that after we kind of get things back and back going again, maybe late summer, early fall, we can look at doing. So we've already been kind of on our path to implementing a few new things, and with Chris's guidance, she's definitely stepped on the pedal a little bit and got us going down the road.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim. And just before you quit talking, I'm going to tell people what your library does when people walk out the door without checking out books.
We typically tackle them. That's our MO. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Not much really. We'll talk to them. We'll catch up with them. We realize that if something goes out the door, then and if it's an accident, not a big deal. We got rid of our security gates probably 8 or 9 years ago, and yeah, we know there's going to be some theft, but we feel that just trying to talk to people directly, treat them like one of your peers, and just say, hey, I notice you might have dropped that in your bag, or you might have missed checking that out. Let me help you with that. Offer to help them out, sort of a thing. So we're pretty laid back about it, and again, just realize that there are a lot of things that are much more important in life than purchasing or losing the purchase of a book.
Okay, so like I said, everybody's got different policies, but just think about, I guess you want to create win-win situations. So go from there. So to wrap this up, Darlene started off with, this is the All of Us. This project falls under the All of Us umbrella. And I've got a quote that's from one of the other videos of All of Us, Dr. Greenland from Feinberg School of Medicine. And he says, well, it's all about health. It's all about disease. It's all about behavior. It's all about environment. So he was talking about the broader All of Us research program, but this also applies to the All of Us dementia awareness, the All of Us dementia friendly in terms of the community. It's about health, disease, behavior, and environment. So by participating, it really helps people with dementia. They're more engaged, they're more independent, they get understanding, they get respect, and they've done very little research to find out overall what older adults want. The piece of research I've seen is, what they want more than anything is they want respect. So dementia or no dementia, that's just something that can go a long way, which, I'm speaking to the choir here, I know. When we treat people with dementia, when we communicate with them and pay attention to them, we also decrease the stigma. We're saying to them, you don't have to stay home and hide because you can't remember how to use the electronic card catalog. Come on in and we'll help you out. It's okay. And then this also helps to build stronger individuals, families, and communities. I'm in Illinois, where our Department of Aging or our Medicaid support comes directly from the state. It doesn't come from the community. And a lot of states, that support comes from the community. So I think all communities are better if we support the community, and if we actually had a little money in the game with it, that might make a difference too. But communities where people feel valued and where an institution like the library is serving everybody generally is a better community for everyone. So we'd like to, Jim and I can be here to answer questions. We'd like to thank you all for participating, and thank especially NNLM for supporting our grant and hosting this webinar today.
Thank you. That was very informative. We are at the bottom of the hour, so I know that you had left us with your email address. So please, people, please follow up with them if you have additional questions. And also be sure to look out for the email we'll be sending you with the online survey and opportunity to get your Medline or your Medical Library Association CE, and find us online. If you haven't joined NNLM, if your institution has not joined us, please consider that. And so you'll have access to more of these great presentations. Jim, Chris, thank you again. That was very, very good. We appreciate you presenting to us today. That concludes our program. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the National Network of Libraries of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel. Select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.